Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Yorkville podcast. I'm your host, Dave Lawrence, here at the beautiful Yorkville Sound, all new and improved studio podcast facility. Our guest for the first time ever is Mr. Todd Michael. For those of you who don't know, Todd is the chief speaker designer here at Yorkville Sound and has been here a number of years.
A number of years, yes. About 25 years.
25 years total.
Yes.
So I got to say, and my own curiosity is because I've been here at Yorkville for about 10 years myself, and I've known you since day one, since I got in here. One of our colleagues, Paul, said, you, being the sound system head, have to go and meet this guy.
Yeah, and anything bass related,
exactly.
We go, where's Dave?
Yeah.
Which he walks in and then says, it's not enough.
Yeah. Augment that, please.
Yes.
So
it'll be fine if you double
exactly,
double
which
it.
we did recently, and
Yes,
we'll get to that
we'll
soon.
get to that.
However, so when I first got here, Paul said, you have to come down and check out this guy. He's a wizard beyond all things audio. My curiosity has brought me to this first question to you, if you don't mind, Todd. And it may seem a little bit run of the mill, but let's just get right to the brass tacks of it. How did you actually get into speaker design yourself? Where does that come from?
I get asked that a lot because, there are a ton of guys that see what I do, whether they're coming through the factory on a tour.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'd love to have your job. How did you do it? And it was really by a series of unfortunate events, if you want to call it that, or whatever.
Yeah. A comedy of errors, perhaps.
I was a horrible student all through school. I was there for the social aspect of it, and just did horrible in school. Went through high school and typical long hair.
Yep.
Party guy the last semester. The guidance counselor calls you in and says, so what are you going to do with your life? And I'm just like, I can't stay here forever. and it was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I knew the road for academia was not for me, but I grew up on a farm and I was always working with my hands, fixing things, building things. And I thought, well, I've always enjoyed building furniture.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was like, I think I want to design and build furniture.
Wow.
So I went to George Brown College for furniture production and design.
Really?
It was a 3-year program. And again, didn't do real good on the academic portion of that, but I loved building stuff. And I was actually very good at it.
Wow.
So when I started college, there was lots of jobs as a furniture maker or a custom cabinet builder or something like that.
Yeah.
By the time I finished college, IKEA had sort of blown up and taken off. The economy was soft.
Sure.
And when you wanted to be a speaker or a furniture designer, you always sort of fell back on, you could always get a job doing kitchen cabinets and stuff like that, right? It was like the pay the bills type of job. But those places were closing up because people just went to IKEA, bought stuff, put it together themselves. And so when I was done school, I had a hard time finding a job. I worked for a guy that built really high-end boardroom tables for Bay Street and reception desks, and it was great, but he just didn't have enough work to keep me busy. And that would have been around the very early 90s, like maybe 1990.
Okay.
So I was looking for a job, and it was at the same time that CNC equipment was sort of just taking off, and it was the wave of the future. And it was like, oh my God, computers control stuff, man. It was like, you had to learn how to do this. So I saw an ad for another Canadian audio manufacturer for a CNC operator / wood shop job. And I had no clue what they did.
And you hadn't been trained in CNC machines previous to that?
No, it was literally the courses were just coming out of the colleges and stuff like that. And back then it was like manual G-code programming. It's not like CAD/CAM today or stuff. You literally learned how to line by line programming and stuff like that. It was a nightmare. But the start was, I figured if I could learn how to run CNC equipment and program it, I'd have a much better chance at finding a job.
Sure.
Because they were scarce, but I figured that would be an up on all the other guys that are trying to get a job. So I went for an interview, and we'll just say it's another Canadian audio manufacturer. And I literally knew nothing about them. Didn't know what they did. Didn't know what they built. And I went for the interview, and it was in this rundown factory, and there was nothing in it but this beautiful brand new CNC router.
Oh, okay.
And I was just like, oh, there it is. I got to learn
The angelic light descending upon it. Yeah.
So they hired me, and I knew they made audio stuff.
Okay.
Something like speakers or something, but I didn't know if they were pro speakers or home speakers, but I didn't care. I just thought, I got to learn how to run that machine. And they had just come out of bankruptcy, so they had literally went to the bankruptcy auction and bought back the CNC router and some inventory, got this location that was a pretty rough rundown factory.
Sure.
And they said, you've got the job, and you'll run the router, and we'll send you back to school to do the programming and all that other stuff. But we're not actually ready to start manufacturing anything yet. We got to set this factory up. Like there was no offices.
No, so they're literally starting from zero
from
again.
Zero.
Wow.
With next to no money, just coming out of bankruptcy. So for the first 6 months, we built offices and ran electrical wire and did drywall.
So you were more of a contractor than anything else.
Yeah. And I was like, I remember leaving the interview, and I was hired for $17,000 a year.
You thought this was huge.
I was driving home. I was like 20, right?
Right.
I'm like 20, hair down to my ass, and I was like,
Sure.
what am I gonna do with all this money? Like,
Little did you know.
little
Todd.
did I know,
Yeah.
like it was salary, so they didn't have to pay me overtime too. We were working like 60 hours a week. So slowly we got the factory ready to start manufacturing stuff, and they just sort of announced one day, we're manufacturing now.
Sure.
And I was like, what is it that we're building here, right?
Right.
And I didn't, there were no finished speakers lying around, but there was parts everywhere. Like they had bought back some inventory, and there would be like some magnet parts and some speaker baskets and some
So
grills.
had you actually seen any diagrams or blueprints?
There was nothing.
Nothing
there was
at that
this
point.
pile of stuff, inventory that they bought back,
Wow.
and a CNC router, and then they acquired some investment money, but the investment money was supposed to be for manufacturing stuff, but it was really buying more equipment and setting the factory up and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So then we started manufacturing loudspeakers, and I was just like, this is cool, right? And the guys there were great. One guy in particular, Paul Bauman, who was like an acoustic wizard. Like he was small portion of ownership in the business. And he and I got along really good. Both loved punk rock and grunge and all that other stuff. And we just worked our asses off. But it was a place that they built everything. And when I say everything, they even made their own transducers. And when I say, so they would press their own cones and their own spiders and their own surrounds and machine their own magnets and all that other stuff. So I was really just thrown into this audio manufacturing world. And it was a place where one day you could literally be pressing Kevlar cones, and the next day you're running a Gescholt turret lathe, like making magnet parts.
So you came in on the ground floor literally as a jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades with the goal of just getting in that wood shop.
So you could learn that CNC machine.
CNC equipment, and this place seemed very unstable. To be honest, it was like if a frat house joined up with an insane asylum,
right?
That joined up with a circus and said, let's manufacture loudspeakers, right? But it was great.
Which was the perfect thing for you at the time from the sound of it.
I loved it. And all the guys that worked there were the same way, right?
Cool.
So slowly I got into, with Paul teaching me like, the difference between horns, and like basically started working with him designing the product and prototyping the product, as well as manufacturing all aspects of from the wood to the metalwork to the transducers.
Impressive.
And I was the first guy they hired, and there was a really high turnaround, but I fell in love with the place, and I fell in love with audio.
Yeah.
For like really like not only the audio itself and the manufacturing of audio and the design of pro audio, and this was all very large scale.
Sure.
Like big systems. And then the other bonus of that was I started getting to work with the sound companies in Toronto that were using this equipment. So I could go to gigs and just say, can I just hang out in the mix position and just watch? Can I help rig? Can I help? I would work on weekends doing installs and just run wire and learn how they would come in and spec everything from like a hockey arena to a clothing store. And I, like, again, I was young.
Yeah.
had no responsibilities.
No, and at that point, you're like a sponge too.
All
right?
of it, anything I could learn. And this is like pre-internet, right?
Of course.
I'm old, right? So this is all pre-internet. So you really learned from the people you were with.
So you would say that Paul was basically a mentor for you. Yeah, huge mentor.
And again, Paul was a heavy hitter. Like really knew his stuff. He had like degrees in acoustics and radar and all this other stuff. And so like to work with him and learn was like a really rare opportunity.
You got to literally learn from Merlin, basically.
One of them, yeah. And he's gone on to do like, he went to Law Acoustics for product design, and he worked at JBL. He's worked for Turbo Sound, and like
he's been up and down all over through the industry, and he's very well, obviously,
very well known, and very. So I got from a young age to kind of work under him and the owner, who was very knowledgeable as well. But the place was an insane asylum, literally, and it was okay when I was young. I was the shop foreman. You know, I did everything from accounting to run a lathe in the machine shop and all that other stuff. But the guys that were working there, we were all young. We loved hanging out. It was one of those places that come 5 o'clock, no one went home.
No.
We got a case of beer, and we went out behind the factory, and like we threw a frisbee around and dragged a sound system outside, and like we're blasting music, and someone would be changing oil on their car, doing a brake job, and it was just. But it got to the point where it was really too much for me, but I had learned a lot, especially about the design aspect of it.
So at that point, basically, how much time did you spend there in total?
I was there almost 5 years.
In 5 years total. So in 5 years, you're taking all this in from Paul. You're absorbing anything from what it sounds like anyways, accounts payable, all the way to operating lathe. And this is coming from a kid who's literally just got out of college. And at this stage in the game, you were just looking to simply get into learning how to operate a CNC machine to apply your trade further because you thought that was the future. Right. And little did you know you would end up so far in depth in terms of this pro audio world.
Never had that goal.
No.
But then after a period of time, I knew about Yorkville. I didn't know very much about Yorkville.
Right.
Even though they were literally 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
I really didn't even know where the factory was, but I knew Yorkville was a manufacturer of professional audio equipment. I didn't know about the connection between Yorkville and Long and McQuaid.
Sure.
But I kind of knew of them because like when I would go on these install gigs, sometimes we would be installing our stuff, and sometimes I would see these Yorkville products, right? And
what's this?
Those are those guys that are in Toronto or Pickering somewhere too.
Sure.
So there was a sales guy who left and went to Yorkville.
Yeah.
And we would stay in touch and go out for drinks once in a while. And we hooked up a few weeks after he left. And I said, how's it going over at Yorkville? And he was like, you should really come over and check it out.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, like I didn't think it was very big. And he said, no, the place is like run great. There's a ton of nice people here. It's like set up for large scale manufacturing. They have all the latest equipment. And I went, really? So I was kind of like in the back of my head, like, you know, I knew it was sort of time to leave where I was. But
to progress, basically.
But there's not a lot of places to go if I wanted to stay in this industry.
Especially in Canada.
For sure.
Yeah.
So he called me like a couple days later and said, actually, they're looking to hire somebody. And the general manager, Tom Lever, wants you to come in and have an interview.
Sure.
And I had this like kind of perception that it was very corporate, like, you know, like we're just like, and of course I meet Tom Lever on my job interview, which that just goes right out the window, right? Like he's
so when you came over from that environment in the original place that you had been, you step into Yorkville Sound for the first time. What was your impression?
It's another world,
of course.
You know, we went from scraping by and we manufactured stuff in very small quantities. It was build to order. So a big order would be like 16 subs and 16 tops. And it would take us weeks to make that. Now that was a big dollar amount. But then I came here and you see, like, we didn't have overhead conveyors and assembly lines and all that other stuff. It was all just sort of
nor the manpower probably.
No, I mean we were talking like maybe a 12 to 15 person shop.
Oh wow.
To here where there's like 150 people. So when I walked in, I was like, this is just another level.
Totally.
And Tom and I got along instantly. Like he parties harder than any 20-year-old guy I've ever met. He was in his 50s, right? So we got along really, really well. And he wanted to hire me he had just convinced the company to invest a large amount of money in a powder painting system. We had outsourced all our metalwork powder painting, and he convinced them to bring it in-house. So they had just bought all this equipment. But one of the problems was when they ran it, the ovens were huge and it would heat up the building. So everyone would kind of complain that it was too hot. So they couldn't run it during weekdays. And he had started a skeleton crew on the weekend that would come in and sort of paint enough metal work to get us through the week.
So prefab it basically. So
get everything ready because no one worked there on weekends. It would just be like 5 guys would come in, paint enough metal work, go home. And none of the existing supervisors wanted to work weekends. And they were having trouble getting this equipment up and running, and it wasn't running at the efficiency rates that it should and all that other stuff.
So you with the experience already? And
sort of, but he, in the interview, he said, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, I really want to stay with the design aspect and the prototyping, the product development side of it. And he said, at that time, Bill Woods was the speaker designer. But Bill was only coming in 2 days a week. He lived pretty far away, and he had worked from home 3 days, and he would come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I knew nothing about Bill. I'd never met Bill, but Tom was, projects tended to take long because Bill only came in certain days a week, so things kind of sat for a while until Bill would come back. And Tom was he was like, let's get shit done now kind of guy, right? It was like, go. So he said, I'll tell you, I said, I don't really want to run a powder painting department, but he said, do this.
You got to start somewhere.
Help me with this, and I'll get you into the speaker lab working with Bill.
Amazing.
And I was like, done. So I did that for about a year, and I would work on the weekends on this powder paint shift. And then I would work in the wood shop on Monday, Tuesday, and a half day Wednesday. That would be my full work week. And I started working with Bill, building prototypes for Bill. And then when I learned Bill, there's another guy with this, huge, vast experience that I got to learn from again. Wow. Again, it's sort of that like, what are the chances?
So let me just cut through another question here. You have actually no formal educational training in terms of speaker design yourself.
No.
So you've heard it here first, kids. You too can be a speaker designer if you learn from the right individual.
And I was always sort of self-conscious of that working with Paul, because here was this guy who literally devoted a huge portion of his life going to school and getting degrees and stuff.
Wow.
And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to be successful in this, do I have to do that?
Sure.
And knowing my, history in school, I was like, right?
That's pretty iffy.
That's pretty iffy. But then I met Bill, who was self-taught, like didn't finish high school. And here he was working for Yorkville, designing like all this loudspeaker stuff. So I was like, oh, okay, well, if he did it here, then why couldn't I do it here, right? Yeah. And I had the benefit of working with him to learn, right?
So you've had two very, very solid mentors in terms of the influence of not only your development in terms of your career as a designer, but also probably seeing it, like we said earlier, peripherally from the ground up.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not just coming in as a box maker. You're coming in and seeing every single aspect of this business when you come into a company like this, which probably opened your eyes up.
Sure, because then you're also manufacturing at price points. Yeah. You're manufacturing for large scale manufacturing. Like at the other place, if we designed a box and part of building it was a bit of a pain in the ass, then you were like, okay, well, you have to build 16 of them at a time. But now you're building 500 of something at the time. Sure. If it's hard to get the screw gun in there, you got to do it 500 times. It's a total. So you're designing stuff with just at a different scale and a different. And again, you have a
different output level.
And you have a target price now. At the other place, it was like we'd build it, add it all up, and say this is what it costs. And here it would be like, no, okay, we have to release this product in this category for this much money, and now you have a budget that you have to work.
And it has to be built in this amount of time, and on the line they can only spend this X amount of minutes.
And then you have limitations to the machinery you have, and all that other stuff. You can't design cabinets that don't fit on your line, or you can't punch a grill that fits because it's all that kind of stuff. Right. So it was like, it was just taking it to another level. And then, working with Bill, he had a whole different
take?
Sort of, but he also had an area of expertise that I like with horn-loaded subwoofers. We did no horn-loaded subwoofers at the other place, and Bill was like kind of obsessed with horn-loaded deep bass subwoofers.
Wow!
So I got to work with him, and we were constantly.
So he was a bit of a visionary in a sense.
He was. It was back in the day when Sirwin Vega was one of the few people that had horn-loaded subs and stuff like that. But and he also was really interested in. Sort of like the audio that was developed in the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
By RCA and Western Electric. And people, at first I was like, it's old junk, right?
No.
But I mean, the level of manufacturing that went into that stuff. And it was a huge competition at that time to put sound in the movie theaters. And that's what it was really all started about, was like going from like movies that were all subtitled to getting sound in the movie theaters. That developed a huge amount of really high level engineering. They didn't have high power, so they had little tiny amplifiers. Things had to be efficient. They were typically big horns, and the detail in the driver development, and which is still why today some of those old RCA drivers from the 30s and 40s sell for thousands and thousands of dollars, because home hi-fi guys want them, and especially in the Asian market.
The serious audiophile
serious
types.
audiophiles.
Yeah.
And Bill had been into that stuff for years. So he kind of introduced me to that whole thing, and there was a lot to learn there.
Yeah.
So
you came in with him basically being ahead of the curve in terms of where his brain was at already.
Well, in some ways, yes.
Yeah.
Like, so here you had this guy that had like 30 years already speaker development, and I was able to just, and again, I was like anything I could read. And the internet was now sort of taking off, right? I remember getting our first, makes me sound old, but I remember the first email address when we were here at Yorkville. They'd walk around and go, "Here's your email address." And like, what's that?
What's that?
Send stuff to space, man. Like,
all of a sudden it beams back down.
Yeah, it
and
comes back down. Like, oh, wow. So, working with Bill and Tom loved it because, again, Bill could come in, and then when he was away, I could sort of keep things going until he came back. So projects moved along faster. And just now you had two guys doing work, so you could experiment with more and different things and all that other stuff. So that was just taking it to a next step. And I loved working at Yorkville. I immediately got along with everybody. Loved the environment. It was like we get paid every Friday.
I remember that.
Like, for sure.
Yeah, really?
Like not maybe. Like at the other place, you might get paid. This place is like, no, like it's there.
Yeah,
it's just
amazing.
Yeah.
So can I skip a little bit ahead to, and now you're coming up under Bill, and you're at the point now where you've just basically said that, when he's away, you can sort of take over for things, or at least fill in his shoes and make sure that everything's still running smoothly. At which point was it where Bill actually handed over the reins to you and said, "Okay, kiddo, here's a box. Have you got an idea for our box?" Or did you come to him with an idea for a design? Or how did that work?
Well, that's one of the great things about working at Yorkville is the engineers. This is going to sound bad because I don't even know what the number is, but
there's a lot of them.
We're supposed to be allowed a certain percentage of our time as playtime.
Got it.
It might be 10%. I don't know. I'm very guilty of going over that number.
Sure.
But there's a very small budget and amount of your time. We can do whatever we want if we think it's going to result in a good product or an idea or whatever we want to do.
Sure.
So we are always trying new things.
Yeah.
And if I thought of something, I could do it, as long as it was sort of like eat your dinner before you get your dessert.
Totally.
Like, as long as the pay the bill projects were on time and going well, then we could do it. And it's still like that today. And that's where a ton of really good, interesting products come from, or the ideas that the designers come up with themselves during playtime.
Yeah.
So the first few projects I got were simple projects where we're buying this compression driver right now, and we're using it in like 15 different models. Well, we're going to use this new compression driver, and you have to go back through all those products, put this driver in, retweak the crossover, make sure it sounds good, do the testing on it to make sure it's reliable, adjust the passive crossover, which was another huge portion of learning, right? Doing a really good passive crossover. And back in the day, it was all passive crossovers, like before powered speakers. And I got really good at that. And then slowly it was like I got my own projects. And then as Bill got older, he was sort of slowing down, and I just started doing more and more of the heavy lifting as I felt comfortable doing it.
So then you literally, basically, in a sense, he was pretty much grooming you.
Yeah. And at some point, he retired.
Yeah.
And I basically became the only speaker designer there. And the owners kind of came to me and said, I'd been there a long time at that point. I've been there 25 years, and I guess Bill retired maybe 15 years ago or so. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. What do you want to do? And they said, are you comfortable? And I said, yeah, I can handle the workload. And they said, well, we're happy with the products you're putting out, and everything's sounding good and selling well. So I said, I'll just do the job myself.
Perfect.
And for the last, 13 years or more, I did all of it myself.
Wow.
And then a couple years ago, I kind of went to the company during, me and Steve sit down once a year and kind of go over like the year in review sort of. And it was me that said, I'm not old, but I'm 50. And at some point I'm going to die, get fired, or retire. Like, if any one of those are possible, like we should kind of plan and start grooming somebody else behind me, because it takes a long time to sort of learn all the stuff that you need to learn. So about a year and a half ago now, another guy works with me in the speaker lab. He was working here, Peter Till. And it's sort of like we're getting him ready for someday when I'm not there. He'll be the guy.
So basically, it's a very natural plan and a progression of succession that you've not only yourself gone through that process here at Yorkville, but they've continued to do so almost by default, basically.
And Yorkville is a very
organic
promote from within. Whenever possible, right? If there's a position, and somebody's there regardless of their background or degrees or whatever. Look at Brian Weaver. He's the vice president.
Absolutely.
He started in the QC booth, right? So he started as a QC guy, testing loudspeakers all day. And now he's the vice president. So, anything's possible. You work hard, you do a good job, and you can move up and be promoted within the company. That's what's one of the beautiful things about Yorkville.
It is, and still to this day, that holds very much true. Myself included, I started in the warehouse, and now I'm the product specialist.
And there are dozens and dozens of stories like that.
Oh,
right?
of course. Like, the whole building's full of them.
Like that.
Yeah. So can I ask you this? I'm going to shift gears a bit. I'm going to ask you, what is your proudest feat in terms of speaker design to this day? That's a curveball at you, and I'm throwing this out there. You got the softball questions at first, where you could just sort of guide yourself through them.
I guess you're always most in love with your
most recent
design. But
so let's talk about that.
Well, there's sort of another whole step in that. Again, the history of me in Yorkville, and that was when I met Tom Danley.
Oh, okay.
And we have a working relationship with Tom. We license technology from him, and back in 2002, I kind of reached out to him after I saw some of his designs. And then working with him for the last 18 years has just been like a whole nether level of influence on everything. He is really the guru of gurus when it comes to loudspeaker design. So being able to play intellectual ping pong with him and work with his technologies and implement them into our own products and stuff. And so the first one that was a sort of that stands out when I look back out of the literally hundreds of products that I've developed, it was when we first implemented the technology into the Unity line that we licensed from it, and the U15 in particular. So that really kind of moved Yorkville into another area and sort of moved us upscale a little bit and started doing maybe larger type venues and higher type power handling boxes and stuff like that. So that sort of stands out. But there have been several really over the year. The latest one, the new Synergy line, for sure. That really was you've been doing this almost 30 years, and you hear the same things over and over again from sound guys, right? And particularly guys that are doing large scale sound is on their wish list, right? And it really hasn't changed in 30 years. They always want the same thing. So you're always kind of, like trying to accomplish
Yeah.
as many things on that list that you hear over and over again.
So basically, it's not only just your own designs, but you're constantly out there with your ear to the ground, taking feedback.
You try to.
Input as much as possible,
Sure.
anyhow.
Sure.
And so the actual Synergy system, which has just released last year, this has been in the works for a few years, because I can clearly remember myself going down into that speaker
Yeah.
lab and seeing whatever new iteration of it that you were coming up with.
Yeah.
And all of us kind of just wide-eyed at it at the time.
Yeah. And that's another one that came out of that supposed 10%
Sure.
playtime.
Yeah,
It was like that was always in the background, being sort of tweaked and developed and tweaked and developed, and people would walk in and go, "What's that?" And it's something I'm playing with, and it sort of morphed into what it was that we released. But it took years of just sort of in the background, like tweak and tweak and tweak,
Gently
tweak.
adjusting as you went along. So what would you say was your main inspiration behind the Synergy series?
Well, again, large scale PA, and when I say large scale PA, I mean when you start arraying boxes together, it's sort of like a whole nother ball game, right? To make a loudspeaker that PA on a stick, one on either side of the stage. I mean, I don't want to say it's not hard, but there are certain things that you have to pay attention to, and tricks and stuff to get that speaker to do a good job.
To make it effective.
To make it effective and I mean, there are challenges, but if you pay attention to the details, you can make a really good performing product.
Oh, sure.
But when you start arraying cabinets together, the warts start getting worse and worse.
And more prevalent.
And everything. So for a loudspeaker designer, the holy grail is really a speaker cabinet that behaves well on its own. And when you start putting them together, the performance gets better in every aspect, not worse, which, a lot of people think, you take a point source and then you put them together, everything gets better. And sure, like if you have a single point source cabinet and if you array them together, well, multiples of them are louder than a single box.
Yeah.
But does it sound better? No.
Yeah.
The coverage pattern is bigger.
Sure.
But is it as consistent coverage pattern?
No.
No. So it's kind of taking one really well-behaved point source box and sort of like I've kind of coined it acoustic Lego. You sort of put them together.
Yeah.
And
even the way that they're designed, when you see them, you literally flare them out from each other.
Sure, and it's sort of like can sort of like hold that level of performance,
right,
from a single box to multiple boxes.
Yeah.
So that was the Synergy kind of concept, was a box with really well defined directivity, good sound, good sound quality, high output.
Yep.
And I mean that's what guys always want. They want headroom.
Of course.
They want the whole smaller, lighter, cheaper thing. I mean, that's a given, right? Everybody wants that, right?
Yeah.
Like no one likes lifting heavy stuff. No one likes big, heavy lifting stuff. And no one wants to spend more money than they have to. But having headroom in a product, flexibility, so that it's scalable. Like you can use it for a smaller show or you can use it for a bigger show. You don't need 5 different products to do, different kinds of coverage patterns or output requirements and stuff like that. And then, reliability. Everyone wants stuff that, doesn't break at midnight.
No. And it's going to be solid time after time, loading it out of a truck, throwing it back into a truck.
And easy to set up and move and simplicity.
And power efficient as well.
Power efficiency and again, simple to use.
Totally.
Large scale sound systems, especially in the line array era, have become very complex to set up, rig, prediction software,
time delays,
cabling, processing, lots of amplifiers, and all that other stuff. Where, which there are a lot of large shows that require very large. Maybe I don't want to sound anti-line array, but line array is a tool.
Yeah.
For the most part, a point source is going to beat a line source as far as sound quality every day.
Yeah.
And there's a huge segment of the market in the middle that isn't big, huge shows, but it's, rib fests, outdoor fairs, like that kind of stuff where two speakers on a stick aren't going to be enough.
No.
You need a larger scale array where multiple cabinets have to be arrayed together, and it's got to be simple. You might not be able to fly it.
So not only have we combined this amazing, literally, like you said, almost a Lego type multiple box sound system. Power efficient, yes.
Very power efficient.
Easy to set up, yes. And now let's also eliminate the use of the outboard racks. None of this is passive anymore. This is all self-powered.
Yes.
So you've thrown a whole other wrench into the mix for yourself by powering the box, let alone making it efficient, making it easy to set up.
Yeah, and that really the guys that do the electronics design at Yorkville are the ones that deserve all the credit for that. I'm not an electronics designer, but yeah, they can design amplifiers that are perfectly fitted to the cabinet that you're powering, and process them and make it so that they're very reliable, very efficient, and cost effective.
Yeah.
And they did an amazing job on the Synergy, the electronics and amplifiers.
They
those.
did.
Yeah.
And it's incredible considering you've got that much power inside of a box and it's not impeding the acoustic integrity of that box.
Yeah. And again, efficiency is important for a lot of those type gigs because like, the power at a lot of those locations, shit, right? Like you get there and you're like, what do you got for power distro? And someone points you over to an old panel with like, right?
I can't tell you the amount of time.
There's 220 amp circuits over there. You know, it's like some European plug on one.
And you're hoping that your disconnect plugs into it if you're running racks and the whole thing,
Exactly.
So, yeah. Now, with that being said, the Synergy system started. I mean, give us the basic breakdown for those who haven't seen it in the flesh. It started as a 1515.
The subwoofer was a 1515. It started with the top box design, which again is a little bit hard to describe, but it uses technology that we license from Tom Danley. And it uses a Paraline lens, which is, again, it might be a little over our heads for this type of podcast, but it's a way of very precisely and very accurately controlling directivity.
Right.
So the cabinets have very, very well-defined coverage patterns, meaning that when you put them side by side, the coverage patterns aren't overlapping. That's the problem with most traditional point sources is, they have a specification on the coverage pattern of 90 by 40 or 60 by 40.
Sure, so that it doesn't all sort of bleed in together. And
well, the problem with that is that's an average. It's sort of like an approximation of the coverage pattern. At some frequencies, it could be wider than that. It could be, 70 or 80, not 60.
Let alone the size of the room and the direction.
The interaction with the room. And the problem is when you start putting those boxes side by side, where the cover, you put it in a box that's physically built to be a 60-degree cabinet, you put them together. And at the coverage where it's wider, they start overlapping and create comb filtering. At the coverage pattern where it's narrower, there's holes in the response. So that's where you start putting, traditional point sources together, and the coverage pattern starts to get really ugly, and the interaction between boxes is not good.
No, it's like they're fighting each other instead of working together.
You want a really a point source with a very well-defined coverage pattern that it says, okay, I'm going to cover 22.5 degrees, which is what the Synergy box is. Here. And when I put a next one to it, it's going to cover 22.5 degrees next to it. Not overlap very much, not have any negative interaction. The Paraline lens lets us do that. So that's what's taking care of the mid and the high. And then there's a 15-inch low-frequency driver, which is using technology called a Synergy horn, which is basically a way of taking multiple sound sources and coupling them onto the same horn. Sound sources want to be close together. And traditionally you have like horns that are separated physically, a high horn, a mid horn and stuff. Well, the path length differences, and they're not close enough together to sum and act as a single source. They're too far apart. Based on the highest wavelength that they're reproducing, they have to be close together. And again, that when they're not, it starts creating problems with the coverage pattern. It's erratic and lobing and all that other stuff. Where the Synergy horn, it can take like almost an endless number of drivers if the horn's big enough. And it all sums them onto a single horn. So even though there's multiple sources, the horn behaves like it's a single source.
Wow.
Right? So that part of it is a Synergy horn with a 15-inch woofer. So you put these things together and you have essentially a very well-behaved point source that when you put them together, the coverage pattern gets wider, but stays as consistent.
Incredible.
It gets louder.
Yeah.
The sonic quality stays at the same level. It gets louder.
Yeah.
It doesn't degrade.
I remember when we all first heard it, we went out to the parking lot.
Yeah.
And
They're loud.
They're really loud.
They're very loud.
And they blasted it off the loading dock of our warehouse.
Yeah.
Is where we all first heard that.
Yeah.
thing.
Neighbors love it. Yeah.
Yeah, the neighbors. We were very popular with the surrounding
I've
area.
had several run-ins with our neighbors here, unfortunately, over the years. But yeah, so that was the, and then the asymmetrical pattern of the horn allows you to rotate the box and array cabinets in different orientations that you can get different coverage patterns. Again, that's that flexibility, right?
Yeah.
It's like I've got one box, but if I array them a certain way, I can get this kind of coverage pattern.
Sure.
But you can array them in another way where you can increase the vertical coverage pattern as well as the horizontal.
Right.
So it's, again, flexibility, not needing boxes with a bunch of different coverage patterns to fit different rooms.
Oh, sure. And also all the type of software that you see with line arrays to go with it to then direct that
Exactly.
output,
which we eliminated by
The
just
top?
putting simple settings on the back of the box.
Totally.
That you basically tell someone with very little experience,
Yep.
take these cabinets, stack them on top of each other, point them where you want the sound to go. And then on the back of the box, there's
Hit the
simple
button.
settings
Yeah.
that you tell the cabinets how many of them there are in the array.
Yeah.
So it re-EQs the system to keep the system flat as the low frequency builds up by the number of cabinets.
Incredible.
So you literally say, plug this in,
Yeah.
point it where you want it. If you have 4 top boxes, put the dial on 4 top boxes, and you're starting with a flat sound system with very well controlled directivity pattern, and it's going where you want it to go. And then very efficient, so you can plug a lot of them into a circuit.
Yeah.
And away you go. So for a guy that,
No disconnect, no distro, nothing. It all just literally plugs into a wall.
and there are a ton of guys, you know these.
Oh, yeah.
You know this yourself, that maybe they do weddings all year and they do, small bar gigs and stuff like that. But it might be intimidating taking on larger scale
Completely.
because you're like, oh, that's sort of like the next step up, and the cost of and the complexity of setting it all up. Whereas, we're having really good success with the Synergy system at Long and McQuaid, which we weren't really sure we were going to, only because we weren't sure how much business there was there.
Right. And now we're starting to realize pretty much altruistically and almost by default that market is there.
Sure.
Yeah, and they do want to be able to tap into that as well too, because these could be for the average, let's just say, pro audio or DJ, or whoever the case may be, if they've got a gig, like you said, like a Rib Fest or something like that, they don't have to turn down that gig anymore.
No.
They can take it.
Yeah.
And that can start to become bread and butter type of regular gigs for them.
I mean, you still have to have a good sound guy to mix the bands and set it all up and EQ your interaction with the room and all that stuff. There's only so much we can do for you, right? Like it's not like you don't have to have any experience in mixing sound or anything like that. But yeah, they can go to Long McQuaid, rent this for a very
reasonable
price,
very reasonable.
set it up, plug it in, and away you go. And we're seeing that over and over again, and it's very, it's
telling if you ask me.
It is, and it's also, you can do a very big gig.
Well, this is it.
At Rib Fest in Burlington last year, we had 8 tops and 8 subs, and they were doing an outdoor crowd of like 3,000 or 4,000 people, and it's just plug it in, no rigging hardware, just stack it up, point it out at the audience, and away you go.
Where even something like earlier the Paraline series, it's a great system, but it wouldn't have done anything like that.
And again, that was the limitations. It's a good box, but you can easily use 2 cabinets. So when 2 cabinets sort of suit the gig you're doing, it's great. But the Synergy was always those guys coming back going, we really need more, and we're stuck at 2 boxes with the Paraline unless you use some rigging hardware and bolt 4 of them together and stuff. But yeah, it was that we want that next step in output for that next size up gig where we need more output and more coverage pattern. So that was also like an indication to me that the business was probably there. you know.
And we were answering the call without necessarily hearing the ring.
Yeah, yeah, and also, I mean, these days, you know how many street parties and festivals,
Absolutely.
and all these EDM guys and DJs that are. I mean, there's a huge market there.
Sure.
Where they need really loud PA with a lot of bottom end. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got to be affordable. They're not like huge gigs where the budget is huge.
No, and this is a thing too. It's got to be able to, like you said, the affordability is one thing of it. And one thing that I found, especially for us, because we're going to be using a Synergy stack this year for an event going on downtown, that we never would have taken on before because we have the access to this now.
Sure.
And again, you're saying affordable, efficient, effective, right? All three of these things.
Yeah.
This is the real incredible nature of this sound system now. And with that, you're literally putting the power back in the hands of these audio people who at one point might have felt, well, that's out of reach, so it keeps me out of that category kind of thing.
Or worse, they try and take
too much
our product that really isn't suited for those type of applications and put a bunch of 12 and a horns that are really kind of they're not meant to be arrayed together. And we've all seen those gigs where they have like a bunch of 12 and a horns stacked up in a pyramid on either side of the stage, thinking I just trying to use more of them to get louder. And it never sounds good.
No, and then what happens? They basically end up losing a contract. They're not going to get that gig again, and that kind of blows your name right out the window. So now you have the opportunity to not only back it up with the quality of gear.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So that it changes. It's a total game changer.
It is a game changer for Yorkville, and it's again proving very successful. We're selling a lot of the boxes. We're getting lots of really good feedback, especially at Long McQuaid.
Yep.
And that's starting to. We're working on developing new products for that product line.
So. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
But with that being said, we've already got one that was just released at NAMM this year.
Yeah.
And that is the talk of the town in terms of the EDM and the DJ world. And let's face it, that's where a lot of this PA is being fed into anyway.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that being said, the Dual 21.
The Dual 21.
Let's talk about this.
The SA221S.
Thank you. An extension of the Synergy series.
Yes.
Whereas initially it was just going to be the box with the 315, the triple 15 in it, and then it evolved into a need for deeper bass.
Well, the 315 was sort of developed to work well with the top box, physically as well as acoustically. A tall, thin box that would get the cabinet, the top cabinet at the right height without the need for rigging or all that other stuff. Again, that sort of like stack it up and go.
Yeah.
And the 315 is very high output and it goes low, but I kind of anticipated because you're one of those guys, there's this insatiable lust for deep bass. There's never enough deep bass. So in the back of my head, while we were developing those two products, I kind of knew there was going to be another subwoofer in the works, and the 221 is it.
Is the brainchild of that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible when you consider how you go from, again, the 221 to triple 15s and then the high tops as well, too. Because that's probably, in my humble opinion, I'll say it at this, it is the most widely controllable in terms of low, mid, and high self-powered sound system with the maximum output out there. I don't think there's anything that compares to it, really.
I mean, obviously I'm biased, but
of course.
But yeah, I mean, for the cubic volume, you take a sound system that's this big, and the output from it is pretty amazing. And the 221 was sort of that approach, like if we're gonna make one, we're going to make one, and it's no shortcuts. No. It's using the best 21-inch woofer we could find. Yeah. The amplifier was, like on steroids. It was like put in the capacitor banks, put in everything to get the most out of that cabinet. Up. Yeah. And again, it's a big box. You need a big box to go down low with big vents that work well and all that other stuff. And it was really... What we've kind of coined it is the most possible bass you can produce out of a 15 amp wall circuit.
It's incredible. Yeah. For the amount of, for the depth that thing produces. And also, let's just say, it's not exactly light, but it's not difficult to move it around.
No, I mean, you're fighting physics. If you want big deep,
Yeah.
high output, deep bass.
You need the manpower.
The cabinets tend to be big, and there's not much you can do about that.
No.
And again, we kept that concept of easy to set up, right? You just plug it in with the other boxes.
It's incredibly
away
easy
you
to
go.
set up.
It's perfectly time aligned and all that stuff. You just literally plug it in. You can use the 315 in conjunction with it, or you can use it directly with the top box.
Totally.
And again, it works well with both. That ease of setup and use is what we try to do.
It is truly, in my humble opinion, it is a revolutionary sound system in terms of self-powered, and not only that, but like you said, diverse and directional as well too.
And again, there's more products in the work.
I was just going to say, we've been yapping about this for about an hour straight now. All the PA techno geek heads out in the world are literally online, probably doing their own homework if they haven't seen it already.
And we have videos on YouTube that show the synergy system and show the guts of it, and kind of do a much better job describing what it is. So check those out. Yeah.
And also those were shown at the NAMM show as well too, so you can see it there. Also, our product specialist Darren Butt is out on the road constantly
doing
demos, showing this thing off. So, ladies and gentlemen, if this is something that interests you and you want to see how this thing works live and in person, it'll probably be just a matter of time until Darren comes to your town and shows that thing off, and literally probably gets all the neighbors to complain.
Yeah, that's our goal.
So with that being said, Todd, I know there's a whole lot more that we can talk about. There is a whole lot more that we will be talking about.
Sure.
This is definitely not the last. This has been the first. We want to thank everybody who helped out with this one. James and Ray in particular as well too, for helping with the technical setup.
James really didn't do anything.
James didn't do anything. He got great coffee.
He got his coffee, and he's been sitting with his back to the door, so no one walks in.
He's the bouncer.
Other than that, he's not very good.
We want to thank him for getting this and putting this together. This kind of vision has been going for a while now. There are more in the works,
for sure,
and I'm sure you and I will come up with some other a plethora of topics to speak of. So with that being said, Todd Michael, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
This has been awesome. Thanks, guys.